Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Ocean Vision session. I'm glad to see that bright and early a few of us make it in this room. And before beginning, I just would like to spend a few seconds to introduce ourselves. My name is Emanuele di Lorenzo. I'm director and professor of the program in Ocean Science and Engineering at Georgia Tech. And
I'm Martin Gray. I'm Chief Marketing Officer of Georgia Aquarium. I'm here mostly for eye candy. And my remarks will be brief, which my colleagues will tell you is a blessing. So I'm going to turn it back to Dr. Di Lorenzo.
Thank you, Martin. So, Ocean Visions. Ocean Visions Consortium is a partnership between several academic institutions and aquariums around the country. This includes the Georgia Institute of Technology, the Smithsonian, the Scripps Institution of Oceanography, the Stanford University, and also the Georgia Aquarium, the Monterey Bay Aquarium, and the Scripps Aquarium. The goal of this consortium and initiative is to try to enable solutions through science and engineering. And specifically, Ocean Visions establishes a playground for scientists and engineers to co-develop ocean-based solutions with stakeholders, decision makers, citizens, but also the young generations that, as you may have known from the social medias, have become extremely savvy in trying to do something about the ocean. Another important goal of Ocean Visions is also to create a platform for research and investors to expedite the developments of startup enterprises to bring essentially these applied solutions to scale. And with that said, today we are happy to present a few solutions that leverage smart water sensors in high density areas like cities. And in particular, there are two problems that we'd like to address today. The first one is the global water crisis. Just a few weeks ago, you may have read on the news about New Jersey and another kind of lead contamination case. And also the issue about with flooding in coastal areas, in coastal cities. All of you have followed Dorian on TV and know the damage that it makes. And so today we have two great speakers that are going to introduce some concepts to essentially tackle these important problems. The first speaker, talking about the global water crisis, is Dol Avant, who is the CEO of Aquagenuity and a Harvard graduate. And today she's going to talk about you can't have a smart city without smart water. The second speaker is Russ Clark, who's a senior research professor at the Georgia Institute of Technology. He's an amazing engineer, and he's going to talk a little bit about adapting to coastal flooding with smart sea level sensors. And so with no further ado, please let me welcome Dol on the stadium. Thank you.
All right. Get my props. This little tube here is going to change the world. So, all right. The 20th century is dead. In the 20th century, corporations and major organizations, government entities, they made all their major decisions in private boardrooms, completely separated from the people those decisions were impacting. So the way that the public found out that there was a problem with one of those decisions or something went wrong is because a crisis or a scandal hit the headlines. In the 21st century, transparency is the new currency. So any entity or organization that wants to thrive and survive in the 21st century has to adopt innovation and technology in order to engage consumers before they make decisions and to predict and prevent crises, or as I say, hashtag data to the people. So I applaud every city and every organization that's attempting to create the future. You, however, cannot have a smart city without smart water. So we're going to talk about a few historic examples of what happens when you don't innovate in the water space. Cape Town was the first major developed city to actually, literally, run out of water. But Cape Town, as shocking as those headlines were, is not an anomaly. There are actually 500 major cities in the world right now under water stress. And I guarantee you that the people who know that information and the people that need to know that information are not the same groups of people. In fact, by 2030, there will be a 40% more demand for clean water on planet Earth than there is supply. Now think about that for a minute. According to NASA, 37 of our largest aquifers in the world are being depleted at a faster rate than they're being replenished for the first time in human history. What is a world without water? So this problem is going to continue to be exacerbated, both because population, urbanization is increasing, and also because pollution is increasing. And it puts more and more pressure on the limited clean water supply. Another example, when Flint, Michigan hit the headlines, we were all shocked. I'm a data scientist and a graduate of Harvard University, so when this hit headlines, I really wanted to understand water's impact on public health in the United States. And Flint began to prove that water is not a third world issue, because in fact, what I discovered and said in my TED Talk, there are actually 3,000 locations in the United States with more lead in their water than Flint, Michigan. Right here in the US, the most developed country, some would say, in the world. And this is happening because our infrastructure is so incredibly old. The pipes are 100 years old, they're crumbling, they received a D rating from the American Civil Society of Engineers. And to fix it would cost about $1 trillion. I can guarantee you that most of your local municipalities do not have this extra money sitting around in their budgets. So that means the problem is going to continue to increase. Here's another historical example. This is the Cuyahoga River. Now, about 28 days before Neil Armstrong walked on the moon in 1969, this river caught on fire. Now, it's water. Now, what is in this water for it to catch on fire? Like, what is that about? But this wasn't the first time that the river caught on fire. It wasn't the second time. In fact, dozens of times this same river had caught on fire in previous decades. It was so toxic in rivers around the country that in 1970, Senator G. Nelson started Earth Day. And later that same year, they founded the EPA. Now, next year, they'll celebrate the 50th anniversary of the EPA and Earth Day. And guess what? Still right now, today, there are 1.2 trillion gallons of industrial waste being dumped into our waterways in the United States every single year. So that's how something like Erin Brockovich happens. We've seen the movie about water causing cancer in a California town. This same cancer-causing chemical has been found in water systems across all 50 states. It's not regulated by the EPA. In fact, not only are we not monitoring some of the things that we know cause harm in our water systems, but we're also not monitoring what we call the last mile. After water leaves that water treatment plant, it has to go the last mile to get out of your tap. And that's where all the problems start to happen. So that's how you get to a situation where there are actually 233 million, that's 71% of Americans, have some form of contamination coming out of their tap. And most of us have no idea. By the time it hits the headlines or people start getting sick, that's far too late. So right now, humans are actually the sensors letting us know that there's a problem with our water supply. But we believe technology can help us do better. So we made an app for that. This is going to continue as a global problem because 80% of global water is returned to the water table completely untreated. So imagine how bad it is in areas where they don't have even the limited legislation, regulation, and infrastructure that we have. Water is not a political issue. It's a human issue. This goes above and beyond your black, your white, your Republican, your Democrat, your nationality. We believe that every citizen on this planet has the right to know what's in the air we breathe, the food we eat, and the water we drink. And it's going to require smart citizens coming together, or as we say, smart citizens united, with technology to solve these issues. So we have a problem. Most of the people on the planet are actually being poisoned in some way by their water. And even in the developed world, most of that contamination is happening in the last mile. So we're developing an intelligent, real-time, digitized water quality monitoring system that we can use from beginning to end. That's Aquagenuity. I'm the founder and CEO of Aquagenuity, where water meets ingenuity. So we're developing a suite of products, including sensors, that allow everyday citizens to put the power back in their hands. Because the government can't fix this problem alone. Every single citizen has to help us gather this data and track this problem in real time. So our app is super simple. You put in your zip code, tells you what's in your water, what that means for your health, what kind of filter do I need? Not all filters are the same. And it even lets you check real estate or restaurants by water quality. Then we get to this fun thing, the test kits. You get one of these in the mail, you're gonna get a strip a group of strips. Looks just like this. This little strip is going to change the world. You run it under your tap. It tells you in real time exactly what's in your water, so you know what to do. You scan it into the app, and now you have a historical record of that. And then, of course, we can deploy sensors. But not only do you get a record of that as a consumer, but the city can have that same data to make better decisions to help predict and prevent crises. So we want to distribute these kits around cities so that we can run our analytics, our algorithms on top of that data and help cities get ahead of, understand where there are issues in their infrastructure. This is what we call the future of water, which is transparent. Imagine a world where water quality data is visual and easily accessible to everyone. That's what we're building at Aquagenuity. We invite you to join the Water Genome Project. We're making Atlanta the first city in the world to map all of their water. And every city that adopts this program, gets these test kits in the hands of citizens, can help us on our mission to make sure that every consumer, every citizen, every corporation, and every city can safely answer the question, what's in your water? That's what we do.
Thank you, Dol. Thank you very much. So our next speaker is Russ Clark.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you. I am so looking forward to bringing, I was just telling Dol I cannot wait to bring a bottle of those test kits strips to the Georgia Tech campus and check every building because I know some of them need some attention. And so thank you for that. That is fantastic. I'm Russ Clark, and I'm a research scientist in computer science at Georgia Tech. And for the last couple of years, I have been working on the most exciting and rewarding and exhausting project of my entire career. And I want to share with you a little bit about what we've been up to. The genesis of this project, the origin story starts about 2 years ago. 2 years ago this week, Hurricane Irma visited the Georgia coast along with many other places in the southeastern Caribbean. And we saw some extensive coastal flooding. And unfortunately, we did not have much visibility as to what was going on at the time or even understand what was happening. And in particular, how different this storm was behaving relative to other storms in previous years and in recent years, even though the forecasts were very similar. And so basically what happened during that storm is we had a single monitoring point that NOAA operates at Fort Pulaski on the Savannah River down in the Georgia coast. And from that vantage point, we watched remotely because we had all evacuated. Everyone east of 95 is the blunt instrument we use for emergency evacuations in Georgia. So we left and watched remotely and unfortunately had very limited visibility. And what we saw was the water levels at Fort Pulaski during that storm were actually slightly lower than they had been the previous year for Hurricane Matthew. But when we went back home and saw what had actually happened, it was wildly different. And in fact, there was much more severe flooding in the places where people live and the places where people work. So what happened? Why is this the case? Well, as the result of that, we said, hey, I think it's time, I think it's possible that we should be able to have much more precise local information about what's going on with water levels. We have the technology. This is the 21st century. Let's see if we can make this happen. And that's what we've done over the last 2 years. We said we worked with our partners at City of Savannah, at Chatham Emergency Management, and put together a program to deploy water level sensors on critical infrastructure. Basically, our story is we want to know what's going on in every neighborhood, on every bridge, on every creek, because we know that that story is wildly different. That's what we've been able to do in deploying these sensors, now around 40 of them. And guess what? Just in time, there's no lack of data for this project. Last week was very busy. This is our partner at Chatham Emergency Management, Randall Matthews, who was running the command center basically last week during the evacuations. And this is what we experienced. And fortunately for the Georgia coast, not a major impact from the point of view of flooding this time, but we certainly didn't know that. For the week before the storm, this is the ride we all took as we were preparing. Imagine you're a city, and some of you are, an emergency manager, a planner, responder. How do you get ready for this when the forecast changed this dramatically every 48 hours as you're preparing for this? And that's what we are now going to get to go through again this weekend with a similar picture, though hopefully not quite as severe a storm. So this project has been an exciting combination of bringing people together from all forms of, all parts of the community, a large team of us from Georgia Tech, but most importantly on the ground in Savannah, in the community, the city, the county, local schools, local community engagement partners. Very fortunate to have Dr. Mildred McLean as part of the team, who is really world-renowned environmental justice expert and leader in that space. And she has certainly brought a wealth of expertise as well as that local engagement to the team, because it's all about not just, okay, you crazy guy from Georgia Tech that likes to hang off bridges and install sensors, that's great. Now we have data, what are we going to do with it? We have to explain to people what it means to them. We have to try to make forecasts better. We have to try to make evacuation orders more meaningful, instead of just saying, hey, everybody east of 95, you should leave now, because that clearly doesn't work and hasn't been as effective. So again, why are we here with a Smart Cities Expo talking about this, is we know that it's not just about some new data, which is great and we all love it and it's important, but it's about how do we make that data relevant to the community and make everything from city planning and zoning to smarter forecasting and evacuation types of activities. So I'll just go through a few slides really quickly. This is a growing problem. Our major flooding, most of our major flooding events have occurred in the last few years. The biggest ones in the last 100 years have been in the last few years. And it's not just about a hurricane. In the last 4 years, after one evacuation in 100 years, we've had three evacuations in 4 years. But this flooding picture is not from a hurricane year. This is just, hey, it was a high tide and the wind was blowing out of the southeast over Thanksgiving. And so we don't have to wait for hurricanes. So this is what we've been doing. We're deploying sensors like this across the county and deploying IoT gateways, Internet of Things gateways. We're using the LoRaWAN technology for a new smart city IoT coverage. And for now, we're focused on sea level and temperature, but also looking at working toward adding other properties, especially in the water quality and things like that. Here's an example of one of the gateway devices, partnering with the local communities. This is on the roof. This gateway is installed on the roof at Garden City, which is a small city just outside of Savannah, but part of Chatham County, so one of our partners in the project. And the goal of all this, or the takeaway is, we're doing this now. Why can we do this now? Because we can do this much more cheaply than has traditionally been possible. We're looking at a unit cost, basically, on each bridge of about $500, which makes this extremely feasible from a scalability point of view, and that's how we're able to get to the density. I mentioned that it's not just about gathering the data, but what are we going to do with it? So lots of work on the modeling. Dr. Lorenzo here leads the modeling team as we look at doing better forecasting. and looking at, you've got lots of things you can look at later if you're interested, but the point is that it's helping make these forecasts more accurate. Um, we have students involved in working on validating the data, making sure that the things are calibrated correctly, making sure that when we tell a story that we can believe it. And of course, working with our primary motivation and our first real partner in this was emergency management, who cares about getting alerts during storm events. Basically, the question they came to us with is, when a bridge is compromised, when water reaches it, we have to keep it closed until we can inspect it. I only have 3 inspectors, and I have 100 bridges. I need to be able to prioritize where those inspectors are going to go after a storm. Can you help me do that? Okay, that's a challenge. I like that kind of challenge, and it's very, very specific and and so that's been a very important part of the project. So the community engagement piece, obviously very important. Last week gave us another great example. The governor declared everybody east of 95 should evacuate. I drove down I-16 by myself. We didn't all evacuate, right? And so, unfortunately, we need to make these forecasts, we need to make these evacuation orders, these responses, much more focused and much more personal, and talk about doing it at the neighborhood level, which is exactly where this project is working now, to bring local messages to the communities, to the neighborhoods, to the schools, to help people understand what this means. And if you have a sensor in your neighborhood that you helped install and that you have been looking at for years, and the data from that sensor is saying your neighborhood is going to be affected by this storm, then that's a more meaningful story. And so we've learned a lot. We have a lot more to learn. But the most important thing for me with this project, as I started with, is there's been nothing more inspiring, more motivating in my career than something that engages the community so fully. And people come up to us and say, thank you so much for doing that in my neighborhood. Oh, and can you tell me when the water is going to be right for fishing? So everybody gets sees a different particular value out of it. But thank you, and we look forward to questions.
Thank you, Russ. We have maybe 5 minutes for some questions from the audience. Anyone? Please, microphone.
Just a quick question for Dr. Clark. How do you envision when you're scaling up? Obviously, there's tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of bridges around the United States that could use these sensors at $500 a pop. Do you still have to manufacture those, build that up? How do you get that out of the university so that you can scale up that solution?
Thank you. Great question asking about scaling, and we're absolutely interested in commercialization and looking at that. I'd probably be glad to talk offline afterward about it, but recognizing the most important thing that it's not just about putting the sensor there, but then the scaffolding around that and making sure that the data means something and is presenting in a locally meaningful way. And so there is a lot more work to it than that, and we certainly recognize that that's part of the problem.
One of the objectives of Ocean Visions is to fund these companies in a different way. Historically, most of this type of operation has been funded by grants. And grants most often have a sell-by date. They're good for a year, they're good for 6 months, good for a year and a half. What we propose, which is somewhat different, is to fund these opportunities with private equity. And we're in the process of raising a fund to do just that, so that Avant can have a longer runway, Russ Clark can have a longer runway, and other companies that are part of our portfolio can do the same. There are about 10 or 12 companies that are working on water solutions, whether it's ocean solutions, river solutions, watershed solutions in our portfolio, and more joining. So our objective is to fund these companies with private equity and give them a longer runway, commercialize them, and really bring these solutions to reality.
for Dal. Hello. Could you talk a little bit more about how you'll be partnering with Atlanta? And you mentioned, both of you, that community engagement is a big piece of the puzzle. How you'll be working with residents or schools, or what that will look like.
Absolutely. I was born and raised here in Atlanta, first of all, let me just say, in the SWAT, right here in the ATL. And they tried to have us move our company about a year and a half ago to Silicon Valley because that's what you do as a fast growing tech company. And I decided not to. I went to the same high school as our mayor, Killer Mike, T.I., you can go down the list, Ambassador Young. I mean, Atlanta is home for me. This is the first time this conference has ever been in North America. It's here in Atlanta. So I believe that this technology should and can expand from here and reach the world. So what we're doing is just adopting community. So our database allows us to look at a heat map and understand, okay, these areas are in a red zone, meaning they're exposed to some level of toxins that is dangerous. Then we want to deploy our technology, low-cost technology test kits, and we don't want the consumer to have to bear the cost of that, even though it's very low. So we're partnering with corporations, community organizations, for them to underwrite that. Consumers can also choose to buy them directly, direct to consumer, and also with our retail partner, and you can actually subscribe. So imagine you get a test kit in the mail, you run it under your faucet, you scan it into the app, all that data is coming back to our cloud so we can run our algorithms. But then you get another set of test strips every quarter, so you can just keep testing and making sure that nothing is spiking. So that helps you protect your family, but it also helps the city, like I said, be the first in the world to map all of the city's water in real time. And then we'll duplicate that process for every city in the world. Yeah, it's a couple of ways to answer that. Number one, there is a recommendation engine. So you get your kind of general area water score. You scan, get your personalized water score for your house where you live. Then it's going to give you a recommendation of what filter is certified by the NSF to remove the geospecific contaminants where you live. So that's a lot more accurate than the picture that most people have, right? But then beyond that, there are solutions. So we're kind of positioned as the Google or the Amazon of water. So there are solutions, technologies that live inside of universities, things that are patented. We have licensed technology from NASA and so forth. Things that can get almost basically anything out of the water. There's actually a membrane that nothing can pass through but water, but the H2O molecule, right? But you'll never see it, in your local hardware store, right? Because it hasn't been commercialized. So part of our work as a company is we're bringing those technologies into low-cost versions that the average consumer can purchase. So yes, absolutely.
Thank you very much for attending the Ocean Vision session, and hopefully we'll get to talk with some of you out there. Thank you.